Howdy doody. So, county class cruisers. What would I build if I was building a 10,000 ton ship in the 1920s? And it has to be 10,000 tons, remember, because as those of you who have seen the other ships and fortifications video, your only option really is 10,000 tons if you're keeping contiguous with the standard established at the time, i.e. we're using the most recently built ship as our basis. Now, myself, I'd have preferred it to be 12,000 tons, but 10,000 tons is fine. But what am I going to build? Matthew Morrick has done some very good threads on the county class cruisers, on their origins and their history. There is lots of good work. There's John Jordan's out there, there's Norman Freeman's. There is lots of good work on the county class cruisers out there. But, and I say this honestly, no one can make the claim they're the most efficient design that could have been chosen. The reason we can't make that claim is because we know they weren't. Why? Because you have an efficient design chosen. The efficient design is forced on the Royal Navy for G3s, eventually for Nelson and Rodney, because of limitations of infrastructure, wishing to build a better ship, and limitations eventually of treaty tonnage limitations. So you know what the response is going to be for an efficient ship. It works the same on cruisers as it does on battleships. So we know what an efficient response is. So you have a real question out there. What do you build? What can be the efficient ship? And if you're wondering why I'm looking down, there is a fluffy research assistant sitting next to me going, Papa, you should be just patting me rather than doing this. It's far better for your stress levels. But no. An efficient ship. I'm also going to be discussing questions from a previous video at this point, going through this as well. And because it's always nice to answer some actual questions that have been coming through. And the questions I'm going to be answering, well, to be fair, they're going to come from the Destroyer Doctrine Long Patrol, which has a whole host of comments. And the reason I'm taking the questions from Destroyer Doctrine Long Patrol while showing and discussing also the cruiser I would have built was because really destroyers and cruisers fit together. They are two sides of the same coin in respects, and they become this in the interwar period. Prior to World War I, they are driven by the need to produce a torpedo ship, a torpedo boat destroyer, and a torpedo boat destroyer, and all that, and that comes up. But that is built in a period when you can build as many cruisers as you like, and you can build cruisers as big and as small as you like. The Washington Treaty only includes one limitation: size of guns. So you can still theoretically build as many as you like. But now there's a limitation on those ships. And the trouble is once there's a limitation, you can't rely on building a few bigger than your opponents build and then just churning out numbers, because if everyone else is building 10,000 ton ships, 10,000, 10,000, 10,000, 10,000, 10,000, and you build a whole load of 6,000 ton ships, the odds are your 6 are not going to match up to their 10. Because that's almost twice as big a ship. And I know, this is the guy who's done UAD videos, and I'm very proud of my Enterprise battlecruiser, because she did surprisingly well versus the Bismarck. And I've done a few more tests with her, and she keeps winning. And ultimately it comes down to she has just enough of a speed advantage, 34 knots versus 30 knots, that she can dictate the range of engagement. And as long as the Bismarck doesn't hit her first, she can dictate doesn't get engine damage. She can dictate that arrangement, that space. But there is a bit of a problem with that, because if she's been operating for months continuously on operations, then her hull will be fouled and things. So she'll probably the speed will have gone down. She won't be able to do her maximum speed. And the thing is, if Bismarck's just come out first time, its hull's probably in pretty good nick. Its machinery's all good nick. They've all been recently maintained, oiled. The speed difference might be not so great. So the realistic scenario is different. Realistic scenario is you should have 2 Enterprises to take on the Bismarck. It wouldn't be a one ship would not actually be the scenario you see in UAD. And it's the same when we start to talk about cruisers. What is going to be a realistically effective design? Designing to always have a speed advantage and basing everything around a speed advantage isn't necessarily the thing you want to go for a cruiser. And that's the reason why the British don't go for it. Because you can't always count for it. But they have an efficient design, and they don't go with it. They have an efficient design, and they do not go with it. Why? And I've looked into this. There are many, many good reasons for going for a balanced layout as they do. The traditional design, yes, it provides you a less efficient hull. Yes, it provides you with the ability to put in less armour, but as we all know, and I think pretty much accepted on this channel and probably in a few others, the British were planning on slotting in armour. So the armour it had, not the armour it was going to be. And honestly, perhaps therefore, I should go with something slightly larger. It's one of those things, once you start to look at the county class and you start to look up at their full weight, full displacement, especially once you get into wartime, those go up quite considerably. Their full load is 14,000 tons for the Kent class. For the London class, it's 13,300 tons. Same for the Norfolk class, but once they're fully armed and fully loaded, it's not far off 15,000 tons. And again, UAD works with a full load displacement. So that then becomes my idea. I'm working to roughly 15,000 tons full load displacement. What am I going to build? What am I going to make it become? Well, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So, I have loaded the comments from the Destroyer. The Destroyer Doctrine 1939 Patron 50 Long Patrol, all 57 of them on my phone, and I'll be answering them and commenting back at them as we go, as we watch what will be unfolding. Now, let me introduce you to my London class. Now, it is displacing fully loaded 14,430 tons, so it's not far off a county class. You will notice there are 3 triple 8-inch gun turrets forward. There is also 6 6 torpedoes each side in 2 triple launchers. There are 2 twin 4-inch turrets and a treble 4-inch turret. Aft, again, this is something the Royal Navy had going around the time, so I feel no qualms about putting them in. And there's even some 2-inch guns because, well, I felt like putting them in. So it's basically a full-rounded design. Characteristics. Top speed, 32 knots, which is pretty much county class. Range, probably a little bit high up there. So, let's see. If I take it down, that takes me down to 14,100. But I can't get it lower than 16,000 kilometers. I've designed too efficient a hull, apparently. Life, woe is me. Woe is me. I'm too efficient in my hull design, and frankly, again, because of the joy of this game, of the simulation, I'm actually going to leave it where it was. Draft is 3% deeper than it normally would be for its design hulls, because I've gone for a slightly narrower, deeper hull, which gives you greater engine efficiency, greater hull efficiency going through the sea, and again is something quite appropriate if we consider the county class. Crew, I've gone for standard quarters and veterans because it's the Royal Navy. Components. It has been set up thusly. It is fairly efficient design, and it is a good design. Reinforced bulkheads, slightly. Anti-flood is at level 2, not level 3. I could put it up to level 3, but that takes it by 6 tons over the limit, and it's just embarrassing to be 6 tons over. Anti-flood 2 does. We've got enhanced reloading, not fully automatic, but enhanced. We've got 18-inch torpedoes, which again fits with what the RM was roughly fitting at this time. They were fitting 21-inch. There you go, we've got 21-inch. Standard amount of torps. If I go for increased, it takes me over the weight, but 21-inch does. We have rangefinder level V, we have sonar, we have RDF. So it fits with what's available at the time, although frankly, honestly, they've got a whole load of sonar sitting here and I go, sonar wasn't really as they get around. They're not really sonar, but it's a critical part of you're spotting your torpedoes coming in, and so therefore in any game where I'm facing Japanese, which are going to be fought today, I am going to be carrying the best I can of it. Get at the time, which is what the Royal Navy fitting, so they have the best for the time, so it's equivalent. Turret armor, well, 8.9 inch on the sides. I'm taking that down to 8 inch. That gives me an arc rate offset of 0.3%, but I can probably, at that point, go, hello. Nope. That takes it well over. Just terrible. Got good anti-torpedoes. Good armor on top. Fairly decent for my secondaries. Casemate armor doesn't exist. And I have a plan down here which shows what my ship looks like. It's gorgeous. Propulsion fits right on, broadly speaking, with what they're capable of. Yeah. I am happy with this design. Yes, it's an all-forward design, but it's as efficient as you can get. So you have big guns forward. You then have a command center space, which has your twin 4-inch. The only real gun you have that's going to be penetrating anything, and it's not going to be penetrating that far, because if you consider how it's been designed, is right aft. This otherwise space is entirely for the engines. And yes, I do realize I have a slightly funny looking funnel arrangement, but I like them. They're cute. And for some reason, despite that being, I swear, a smaller, thinner funnel, in UAD, it won't fit in that position. So, c'est la vie. C'est la vie. This is our Royal Navy ship. This is our London class. This is what I would have designed based on this. And I also have a Japanese design, which is coming up. Now, please note again, that is the fully loaded weight. Fully loaded. I think this looks a pretty darn decent cruiser design myself, and it looks fairly efficient. Pitch, I'm a little bit worried about, but I've had worse pitch. I really have had worse. So I'm not going to worry about it too much, and it should be okay. I could try and even it out with the armor. I could sort it out that way, but that doesn't allow me to do much. It does give me a slightly stronger give me a slightly stronger forebelt, which is not too bad. I can play around with this, but yeah, there you go. Still, pitch is there, but and the weakness, honestly, is the aft deck. Aft belt 4-inch, main deck 4-inch, foredeck 4-inch, aft deck 3.2-inch, forebelt 4.8-inch, and the main belt is 8-inch. I'd say that's fairly decent, and that's definitely better than a county class. But speaking and going in terms of all that weight, it's not much more than a county class, and honestly, they have a longer range. This has a longer range. If I take the range down, it still doesn't reach anywhere near a county class's range. It actually is 14,211 tons, which is, considering the full up weight of the Kent class was 14,150 tons. Yeah, I'll take that. The speed of the Kent's 31.5 knots. This can do 32. The range of the Kent's at 10 knots was 15,000 kilometers. The range of this at 32 knots, because that's how it works out, is 16,237 kilometers. So, yeah. I'm gonna say this is this lady would come in at less up than those, especially in their speed at 30 knots. They could do 4,300 kilometers. This can, well, at this point, she can do more than 4 times, nearly, not far short of 5 times their range at full speed. Yeah, she's cute. Now, her Japanese counterpart has been built to be equivalently powerful. Her Japanese counterpart is based on the Furitaka class. Slight halfway offset, but yeah, 8 guns in 4 twin mounts. All those torpedoes. Yeah. I'm happy with both. I really am happy with both. I think they're both going to be interesting ships, and I'm looking forward to this. And I'm looking forward to the questions. And it's a pair on pair. So, honestly, who knows who wins? It's going to depend on, well, on the computer, to be honest. I honestly don't consider 9 versus 8 to be much advantage in 8-inch guns, but it is something that the RN could have done. And please avoid ships and torpedoes. And we go off. We have London, and we have Cumberland. That's quite a good combination, really, as the ship names go. I like the triple turret, the triple 4-inch gun on the aft. That does look kind of cool. So, to the questions from the Long Patrol on destroyer doctrine and destroyer sort of philosophy in 1939. Marcus Franconian, hello. The Dutch did have some interesting ships, as they did love their gunboats. The oddest of these were the Voorn class, 24-metre-long river gunboats with 28-centimetre guns. A significant number were built in the 1878 to 1880s period. A handful was still active during the invasion, and did some fire support to the Arnhem region during the invasion. The other 1910 ships, Gruno, Brino, and Friso, supplied fire support at the inland lake of the Ismail. Gruno even escaped and patrolled the Thames until 1942. She was very much appreciated. Let's see what happens. The Johann Maraitis and Flores class gunboats did some serious damage to the Axis forces. There were 4 K-class gunboats under construction when the Germans invaded, quite a specific defence doctrine class of ship. The Kannenberg class, the Kannenberg that fell in the German hands, was unlucky. There was no tugboat to sail out to England, otherwise there would have been a fully Dutch-armed 5 times 124mm gun destroyer available next to the Isaac Spheres, which the Royal Navy would have really liked to have, because they really liked the Isaac Spheres. The Dutch submarines were specific built to the doctrine for submarines, including the snorkel systems, UHF radios, periscope antenna, advanced hydraulics, and bubble-free torpedo launchers. The Dutch have really good technology. And this ship's and she's already on fire, but let's see. Well, that's 99%, that's okay. Let's go see what the... Oh, good lord, what's happened to you? Damage info, please. No damage info. Oh, 90%. Oh, she's still doing well. Remember, these have a speed advantage, 35 knots. I've designed them to be sort of like they were, like the British were. So they have 32 knots. The British have 32 knots. The Japanese have 5 knot speed advantage. So they have a 3 knot speed advantage. So in many ways, the Japanese should be able to dictate the range of engagement. But both have 8-inch guns, of course. And it's what happens. How does it work? George Newman, not just talking about the stewards dealing with the officers' egos. Well, there goes my snarky comment. It's a good comment to have, but I got there first. Raymond Somerville, hello. My favourite is the Fletcher class. It has always struck me as a very good all-round destroyer. Perhaps not the best in all circumstances, but a good destroyer most of the time and in most situations. Yes, it is. It's a very good... Look, I like the Fletcher class. I wouldn't take the Fletcher... If I was the Royal Navy, I wouldn't be using the Fletcher class. I'd be building something different, because my systems are different than the American systems, and the best balance from them, from my industrial perspective, is different from yours. But for the Americans, the Fletcher is a very good class. And it isn't like me saying, well, you know, it's not really a good class, it only works for Americans. No, it works for any nation which is dealing with the strategic scenario of the Americans. If I was fighting in the Mediterranean, the Fletcher would not be my first class of choice. If I was fighting the North Sea, North Atlantic, again, the Fletcher isn't necessarily my first choice. But it's a very good destroyer for what I'm doing in the Pacific and producing in those huge numbers and operating in the way I do it. In fact, it's probably the best destroyer for that. And that's what nations are expected to build. This is the point I was trying to make in that doctrine, and this is the point I'm trying to make in this cruiser video, is that what you build depends on what you need. For example, I could have built something with 35 knot speed and less armor, knowing what I'm going to be taking on in terms of the Japanese ships. But I wouldn't, because the British wouldn't build a 35 knot cruiser. They would use that for slightly more armor. And that's what they have done to make a slightly more survivable ship, because they realise, yes, they can build a 35 knot ship, that's fine. And in the Pacific, etc., such speed is going to be essential. But if you drop those 3 knots, you can save an awful lot of tonnage and make your ship an awful lot more survivable for fighting in the Mediterranean as well. And Britain's got to be able to fight in the Pacific, the Mediterranean, and the Atlantic, and the Indian Ocean. In fact, Britain's going to be able to fight everywhere, so they can't afford to pursue ships which are very good in one theatre and not as good in other theatres. They've got to pursue ships which are 70% solutions, 80% solutions maximum in all theatres. John Hargreaves, my favourite for its time is the Grom. Regards. Very cool. Tanavelka, many favourite destroyer types of World War II. My favourite destroyer types of World War II is the Traber class. It was gorgeous lines and has most aggression per ton than anything else. Yeah, there are some Polish destroyers, but yes, they tend to be weakened out by the rest of the class. Paul Amos, as one of your male viewers, I always watch the whole video, you or any of the people I follow do follow in full. Often more than once, I don't see the point of starting to watch a YouTube video about history and zip through until you see whatever visually interests you, without listening to the verbal presentation about it. I think this is in comments because I made some comments about how, for some reason, YouTube gave me the stats of male viewership and female viewership, and it said that the female viewers watched on average more likely to watch the whole thing, and I presume that's because there is a large it does tell me there's a smaller number of female viewers to male viewers, and my thinking is that they're possibly, and this might be the algorithm, might be recommending it to more male viewers than female viewers because the algorithm presumes men are more interested in war than women are. I'm not sure about that myself. I think that's a bit wrong, but that's probably based on the algorithm, which is almighty in these technological worlds, and therefore it's more likely there's going to be guys recommend it and guys who don't like it, and therefore don't watch the full of it. And my response actually to that was, thank you. I have to say I agree with you on watching the whole thing. But it was an interesting stat, and as I thought that from it, quite a few are possibly related to me, I felt I should say thank you for that, as yes, I am presuming potentially that a large number of judging by the number of my cousins who claim to watch it, and judging by the number of cousins there are, I'm presuming that a significant proportion of my female viewership are related to me. Tizzy, I wish I was able to watch all the Good Doctors videos in totality, but I don't have enough hours in a day. Just too much great content. Thank you. My pastime. Tizzy, we frequently used to replay at a faster speed. You certainly need to concentrate for them. Thank you. Oh. George Newman, Fletcher class, followed by RN Tribals. Good choices. Honestly, if I was picking from the US perspective, I'd be picking the Fletcher. If I'm picking from Britain, I'm picking the Tribals. I'm more in difficult if I'm from the Italian or French perspective. Mainly because you have to pick the ship that's going to best suit your needs. Actually, I'd be tempted for the Italians to say Gearing class would be best from them, but we'll leave that to one side. And actually, that co-holds with Jack Ray, who says my favourite class of World War II is the Gearing class. Dan Freeman, J class of the Royal Navy. Good choice. I do like the J's. Hello, Gaido. Favourite our destroyer class? Fletcher class. Nice. Ricardo Clancy. Hello. Solid content. Kingsrook. Tribal. Shocking, I know. Yeah, considering the person who does this channel and does all talking has written a book on tribal battle and daring class destroyers. People picking those are definitely getting extra points from me. And unsurprising, really, considering, as I said, I offer that. John Quigley, Fletcher class, not because of the fact I'm a Yank, first generation whose parents moved here from Glasgow in '68, so some British destroyers rank up there as well. Because I was one of the few Americans to step foot on DD-574 USS John Rodgers before she was scrapped in Mexico. Cool! That's very cool, and sad that she was scrapped in Mexico. Fangasmo, I'm afraid neither the Italia Spica class nor the few remaining 250-ton Austro-Hungarian torpedoes qualify as destroyers. If I really have to play within the rules, then the Alan M. Summers class for their looks. I can see that. Paul from Chicago, favourite destroyer of World War II? Hunt class. Yeah, that's probably a proper ugly brawler. Yes, they are. The Hunt class were really... yeah, they were brawlers. They ended up having a lot of fight with E-boats, and some of them do some really nasty things versus E-boats. I mean, they seriously end up actually ramming them. Okay, how's this happening? Because you two are pretty much, as ships go, as balanced as they come. So, what's going on here? You guys should not be... Is it the armor scenario, or are you trying to use it? Oh, you've used a lot of your torpedoes. You've fired a lot of your torpedoes, and so far, not scored a lot of hits. So you've been trying the long-range torpedo thing, but these ships have so far managed to either dodge or not been as damaged by the torpedoes. Oh, that's been hit in an interesting place. If you look at the screen now, the damage report for London, and if you consider the markings of hitting, she's been hit in a rather interesting place. But again, there is an advantage for her with all the guns, all the viewing equipment, etc., and the targeting stuff is forward of the funnels, which does help with fire control. And now we know there's a torpedo coming in, and she's, of course, turning away. Now, this should be advantage Japanese, because their guns are all, well, pointed away for a few seconds, but they are now heading back to point directly at the Japanese. And basically, this is a cruiser duel. This is a real cruiser duel. And they're using their maneuverability as their armor. But yeah, there is an efficiency in hull helping out here. Nicole Ross. Hello, Nicole. Fletcher then tribals because their crews did heroic things. I will agree with that. Heroism is an important part in judging crew ships. Brent Schnicker, the Gleaves class. Interesting. I did ask people to tell me what their favourite destroyers were, so this is why there's these comments. Strider, gosh, UK versus Japan night fight, all out true battle. And Lord, gosh, that sounds so scary, so terrible. Even the thought of kamikaze night drivers, that was unlikely, but still imagine. It's so hard to think of the point of view that point. Someone out there is dying to know how it would have went. Diana McKibby replies for us with a very cool response. Picture this. There are planes flying darkness. You can hear them. You know they have torpedoes and flares because they keep dropping some into your formation. And you don't have fire control radar because you're Japanese. And there are British destroyers who are using radio and radar to sneak around your formation and shoot up your own torpedo formations. While battleships are keeping your radar-equipped heavy units busy trying to train their guns and maneuver their formation despite dropping in their shells quite accurately into the midst of your formation. Meanwhile, your crews are busy trying to send in torpedoes while the British are maneuvering, assuming torpedoes are possible from submarines, and more interested in using their guns and position to damage your ships regardless of their own damage. And ships you damage keep limping away, while your own start listing or burning like firecrackers under 6-inch fire. Meanwhile, the Japanese know this is a delaying action. The major elements of the British Navy are still incoming. This is merely the local elements, and their submarines are already sinking transport ships, lots of them. This is not like the early glories against the Americans. This is a messy, dirty, and filled with grit and bitterness in classic British fashion. Oh, the British are already building more battleships and carriers than were actively in the engagement you're currently fighting, so good luck with that too. Zeros and kamikazes are not much good for night flying, although you don't expect kamikazes to land on carriers in darkness. I think the real point is that if you had, as said, the war began after Tsingtao in 1939, and that's when I sort of put it up, in January 1939, you have a very different scenario. You have a very different night battle potentially take place. Yes, the British do have early instincts in going on in radar, but they don't really have that much there. But you do have the doctrines of reconnaissance by fire, fixing by fire, which was where the destroyers would use their 4.7-inch guns, especially tribals, to fix an enemy target by setting fires in their superstructure using the 4.7-inch guns to allow the other destroyers to fire their torpedoes basically at the fire. And you have the flares and torpedoes as they used at Taranto and as they use at other operations where basically the bombers would be the torpedo aircraft, some of them would carry flares and drop them to illuminate the opponents. It's a different doctrine, it's a different way. It'd be interesting to see what it would happen. Not in a way, that always sounds terrible. It's sort of the person in me who wants to have a better understanding of night fighting doctrine and wants to see what its realistic impacts would like to see that. But basically, if I wanted to see that, I'd like to be able to program a simulation where it's electrons dying. I don't want to see it enough to see people dying for it, if that makes sense. I want to see electrons dying for it. That's always fine. Electrons, I don't mind dying. I can kill electrons any day of the week, and I do kill a lot in simulations like this. This is what some people don't see with modern history. But modern history is as much about simulations as modern engineering and a lot of modern academia and research, where we do try and do computer-based simulations and other things to try and get a better understanding of what the actual options and realities of things are. Some of the people sort of suggest this isn't enough real-world analysis, but let's be honest, real-world analysis involves people dying, and I'd prefer people not to die. So I will quite happily do the electrons work, and let many, many electrons die before real humans have to get in the way. I'm always happy to kill off electrons. Currently, like we're doing now, we're killing many electrons. Whiskey Tango Sierra, Fletcher class, in part because I knew someone who sold one. Cool. Cosmo, 437 Cosmo. Great talk. Good shirt also. Thank you. I put a lot of thought into some of the shirts I wear. Today you might have noticed I'm wearing an HMS Belfast shirt, which seemed appropriate for cruisers. David Nelson, for the record, NASCAR does have a few road courses. Cool. Someday I hope to go to that one. Ooh. What has happened to you all? I should have been watching you more closely. I was distracted by the very good quality questions, but yeah, that's one down. And now that's... Oh, you're out of torpedoes. That's not good. Japanese cruiser being out of torpedoes and trying the long-range torpedo thing is not a good scenario. Perhaps I should have taken off some of your 3-inch guns and given you more torpedoes. That might have made things fairer. Fletcher class from J. Scott. Thomas Mazowski. Mankowski. Hello, Thomas. I'm glad I could watch the Long Patrol because 3 hour plus long stream was sadly out of the question this week. Rage and Marina. I still wonder how they could ignore long-distance destroyer escort duties to such a degree. There are the Deccanese Islands, and they could not ignore the eastern North African border. I suppose the first can build large stockpiles of supplies, but that is hardly true for Libya. Australians. Good one with the dwarf comparison. I'm going to use it. Please do. Poland. I'd add that literally all Polish warships could use mines, except Orzel-class submarine Gangot killers. And all the surface combat vessels had anti-submarine equipment, just in case some unidentified non-German, we swear, sub would decide to drop in the Western Baltic during a war with the Soviets. I'm still not sure if there was a plan to mine the Finnish Gulf with support from Estonia, Latvia and Finland, which had their plans there, but sending quickly moving destroyers with mines to make life of the Soviet Navy more interesting in the Soviet backyard would be fun, I guess. When it comes down to favourite DD classes, I really like the Kangaroos, but Akazukis are close second. Nice choices. They're good ships. And yeah, I would agree. The Polish have many ideas for how to use their destroyers, and that's one of the good, interesting things. Again, it's okay. This always sounds weird, but as a historian, it's quite frustrating sometimes looking at these designs on paper and going, can it really work? It's like this design here. It's not something which didn't exist on paper. Please note, there are design studies, there are things going around which I've drawn from to produce this design. They're not exactly this design, because again, it's produced through the prism of UAD and my own thoughts on the subject, the treaty, and my own idea of the limitations. But I think it would be an effective design, and I think it would have been a useful design. I also find it interesting that in the 2 UAD infused videos I've recorded in the last 2 days, or last 3 days or so, one, speed absolutely dictated it, but it was speed and 16-inch guns versus 15-inch guns, and the battlecruiser managed to win versus the battleship. That was the Enterprise versus Bismarck one. Whereas in this scenario, even with the increased speed, and pretty much exactly the same guns. Both have 8-inch guns. The difference in performance hasn't dictated the victory as much as I thought it would. Maybe because, and this is going to sound egotistical, but the form I've chosen of these were the all-forward guns. With pretty much all 3 being able to easily fire forward in this deck super firing form, it means they are able to be better organized in terms of a pursuit approach. Perhaps if you are a slower ship and you're engaging a faster ship and it's using its speed to keep ahead of you, well, if you've got an all-forward fire, it still has to be within firing range of you. So you can concentrate all your guns firing forward. And therefore, you are able to bring more guns to bear. that might be the reality we're looking at. We might be seeing a scenario where, at the beginning, and I have to say, watching this, it did sort of strike me. The Japanese were constantly restricted in how many guns they could actually bring to bear because they were trying to dictate the distance. Whereas that helped London and Cumberland in a way, because as they were chasing, they could still bring more guns to bear. Strider, I am listening to your advice of letting the beard grow thick. I do tend to keep it quite thick, but I keep it neat, especially when I've got a wedding coming up. As you all know, I'm being man of honor at a wedding, and I will have done so by the time this video comes out. Susan Lane, hello, Susan. Great information knowledge as well. It's always a bit irresponsible to ignore the fact that every ETF launch so far has caused a huge turnaround in BTC spikes. I'm fairly sure that this is an advertisement, an investment, and it's an interesting thing. It's an entire portfolio discussion, which is lovely, which apparently has got 77 likes as well. So I've reported that. Probably Susan. Sorry, Susan Lanes. If you are a real person, please do get in contact with me, and I'll not report you for being a spammer. Rich Hardy, Fletcher class, because I think it gave the USN the same sort of general capabilities that the Chieftain credits the M4 Sherman with for the Allied armies. To Dr. Smith's point, it isn't about top trumps or 1v1 video game matches, and mass has a quality of its own. Dr. Smith? Not sure who Dr. Smith is. Please elaborate. The trouble is, I don't know which Dr. Smith you're talking about. I know actually a couple of them. And I agree with you. The Fletcher class is the perfect ones for the Americans. It gives them the numbers and the capabilities they need. Well, let's do. Shall we do this again? And shall I be nice? What I'm going to do is I'm going to do it again. But I'm going to edit the opponent just a tad. I'm going to give them slightly more torpedoes. And I'm going to give them more torpedoes by taking off 3-inch guns, because let's be honest, they're the Japanese. They never worry about losing some 3-inch guns. Hopefully that's enough components. Roughly. And increased. And I know it's not as big a torpedoes as they normally carry, but honestly, that's the biggest I'm allowed to fit on this one. Right then, now I need to get rid of more weight. What am I going to do? Turret armor? Got that down to 6 inches already. Generic armor. I'm down quite low. I'm giving them slightly more than they actually had in real life. In real life, they had 3 inches. It won't let me go down below 4 inches for the main belt. Half deck, 1 inch. Last weight offset, 0.3%. That'll have to do. But now they've got more torpedoes. Let's see if this affects things. So now they're carrying a lot more torpedoes. Ship details. No. Wait. Overview. 2 times quadruple torpedo launchers. Let's launch. Let's see what happens. You can tell me what's going to happen. They've got more torpedoes now. And avoid torpedoes. But no, the Fletcher class, yeah, agreed. They are, honestly, the Fletchers are sort of, to me, the British go with the large fleet and the standard sort of fleet destroyer. Sort of they have a large fleet and a fleet destroyer. I would say the Fletchers are about halfway between the two, and the US is able to build the yards and mass manufacture them. Of course, they etc. at the pace that they can build them in quantities that they always have enough to do the large fleet role and to do the quantity role of the fleet destroyer, and that's their real advantage. And they are the perfect point for the US Navy. It's, the same reason. The trouble is, the Royal Navy, if they had them, wouldn't be able to produce them in the same quantities because of the scenario the Royal Navy are facing. So they wouldn't have been if it the Royal Navy's needs. That makes sense. Harry Hyde, you left out my favourite destroyer class, the Japanese Akitsuki class, which is fair, and kind of fair, because they weren't in service in 1929 yet, but neither were the Fletchers, and they got talked about. Yeah, but that's because the Fletchers really are the product of what everything else that's gone before. The Akitsuki class come in and they are a bit of they are not so much an evolution, I would argue, as a development. Whereas the US, basically, it's kind of like how the British come up with the swordfish, in that it's a slightly modified predecessor, a slightly modified predecessor, a slightly modified predecessor. Oh, we have something which is really good. Boremus, I kind of like the lines of the Tribal class, and if fitted with 4.5-inch dual-purpose guns, it would be even better. Yes, if they managed to get the 4.5-inch guns working and they'd come up with 4 twinned 4.5-inch guns, that would have been really quite scary. Chris Orion, Fletcher for America, Tribals for the antics. I'll agree with that. Tizzy, being Canadian, I feel it's got to be the Tribals for me. Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised. You guys do have Hyder. That does kind of win the argument for many people. Oh, let's see. They think they're facing battle cruisers because of their speed, and a light cruiser. Let's see. 92%. 98%. She's got fires. It's Black Prince. Oh yeah, it's Black Prince. That is not necessarily a good thing. That's not necessarily always the best name. In British history, it's usually a fairly good ship, but it's not necessarily the best name. Is it going to be lucky? Is it going to have plot armor, or is it going to have plot destruction? Autumn Yule Nash. Anyone who goes on Aussie waterways is crazy, so the fact that the Blue Water Forces are mad lads is not surprising. Shinkaze class. Oh, cool choice. GD Harmon, you didn't ask best, you asked favourite. That's true. A goofy old Summers class. Yes, that is what I asked. People do ask what your favourite destroyers were. Murphy Kappa. Hello. Tribal. Very nice choice. Laserdeck Studios. Quite partial to the Kangaroo class. The Kangaroo class for being the first IJN fleet destroyer since Fubakaki to fix the stability problems of early destroyers and not break another system in process. Those fixes made them dependable workhorses and fearsome opponents. True. Gregory Wake, in answer to your question, the Tribals. Largely because of the stories I've heard you tell about them. Yeah. Nathan Brown, Le Fantastique. I like the way they look. The round platforms under the turrets make them look like they steamed right off the cover of Popular Mechanics. True. My parcel tape. I don't know enough to answer that question. Well, I hope if I continue to provide videos, eventually you will. Entire Slavic. I do have to say, I like the Tribals. They look better and the stories make them even better. Thank you. Oddball for 0311, the Fletcher class because of the USS Johnson. Wayne Boring, Tribals. David Goulding, Tribal class, then the Fletcher class, then the Groms. Enjoy the video. Thank you. Richard Kirk, K class for me, from a teenager. I made a model Airfix Tribal and a fleet of other ships, including a Fletcher. Somehow I thought the Tribal was a bit too much, and comparing it with my little Eagle Matchbox K, the latter seemed much cooler. Daft, really. By the way, do you think it's time that a new biography of Beatty was warranted? Yes, but I feel that the only person who should write it is Drakenfell. I want to read the biography of Beatty by Drac. The Direwolf, and KB the Direwolf, hello. I can the most powerful and well balanced would be the L&M Sumner class that got the Sea Servicing Model 2 by 1944. They didn't sacrifice anything in particular area when you look at their design, and were very powerful destroyers that had enhanced firepower and surface and anti-air rolls. We were really, thanks to their dual rudders versus single, and were more effective at the ASW when you compared them to the predecessor to the Fletcher class for only an extra 150 tons. Granted, being Canadian, the classic answer would be HMCS Haida. Very nice. Now, I hope you've enjoyed the answer to the questions, and now let's talk more about these cruiser designs, because so far I've watched one battle, and now we are in the middle of battle number 2. Battle number 2 appears to be going not too dissimilar to the previous one. They have more torpedoes, and they are able to do long-range torpedo strikes. But again, that is a night option. That's really, it's one of the things about UAD I'd like to do, is I'd like to do a night fighting version, but I understand why you can't, because honestly, it's getting the doctrine to match up in the night operations and getting the kinetics worked out. Any ship which has radar would automatically become supreme in the current scenario of their metrics, because radar seems to give them a ship's own advantage firing through smoke and everything. But the advantage I'm noticing here is the sheer armor. These are basically the same tonnage. They are 2 knots slower, but they have, thanks to their design, they're able to carry more armor more efficiently. Because, and this is the point I have to make with this design, the advantage of the efficient design in this scenario is that to keep the magazines cool and to keep the ammunition cooler, I have to put shielding between it and the engines, because otherwise my powder cooks and my ammunition cooks, and both of these can have an effect on accuracy of fire and also on safe fire control and fire safety. So if I only have to do that once, I only have to have one portion of the ship for this protection, then that saves space in the hull and also saves weight I can use for other things. There's also the advantage that if I've got all the engines, I can design the ship efficiently around it. I can have it go boilers, engines, boilers, engines. And that's probably what I've done. Alternatively, what I might have done in this design is do boilers and engine, boilers, boilers, engine. I might well have done that to give myself spacing between the engines and have potentially the possibility that, if necessary, I could use the boilers, especially if I've divided up it into 4 or more boiler rooms, and I have 4 engine rooms, then I can possibly have it designed so that I can take steam to deter steam to any engine. Can take steam from any boiler room to any engine room. There is always the possibility of sticking in centralized trunking that allows me to do that, especially if I can put that in some sort of protected central space. A central corridor, maybe. And it's an option. It's an option. But yeah, this can be a very efficient design, and I'm liking the torpedoes. I also think this would not be a good thing for something which has 11-inch guns to come across, and I might do a video with that at some point as a bonus, and just see what it does versus a Deutschland class. My theory is a pair of these versus a Deutschland class does not end well for the Deutschland class. Mainly because, whilst, yes, you have 11-inch guns, this thing has armor, maneuverability, and the ability to put several torpedoes in you if it needs to. So, you don't want to get too close to it. But, yeah, this is a lot, even compared to the fight the other day of the Enterprise versus the Bismarck, and it's the things that the results that came out of it. This is a surprisingly easy fight, although again there are shells going off completely wildly, which I presume are aimed for Sanoasa, and actually aren't going anywhere near her, which is fairly accurate. It's one of the things I like about UAD. It doesn't magically make all the shells hit. It's going, this is what's aiming, this is the reality of it, let's see what happens. And if you can hear the Tafra behind me, that's because the Tafra is complaining he hasn't been allowed to come down and lie on the bed I have in my office. I did have the fluffy research assistant here earlier, which was lovely. But they since returned, and food is on the off for him, so he has disappeared off. But the Tafra, who has had food, is going, now I want to go up to Papa. Avoiding torpedoes. That could be the entire advantage. They're decent hydrophones that are allowing them to avoid the torpedoes at the ranges they're keeping, because they're keeping at maximum range. And the slightly smaller, as in shorter hull, slightly deeper, slightly thinner, is allowing them to dodge them slightly more. But, you know. There is some interesting things going on here. And it's interesting considering the dynamics. A lot of fire aboard her, 87%, might be going to lose some more structure due to fire soon. Hopefully gets the fire under control soon. Fire is out. Sonasa is at 73%. But let's go see what the other one's doing, because the other one looks strangely still from my perspective. Sorry, this is my control which is causing issues, not the game. Please note, I'll always be honest when it's me mucking up, not the game. This ship appears to be in a little bit of trouble. The fight has moved beyond it, which is good for it, but problematic for its flagship, because that means that its flagship's going to be dealing with both cruisers on its own, and eventually, at some point, if they beat the flagship, they'll turn around and come back for this. 47% structure, flotation 100%, that's good, but 2 engines down. But it's now not using ammunition, whereas these are firing away. These have managed to keep us a pair. It's interesting to note. They are supposed to be under AI control, so at some point I must have turned off the AI control. I do apologise to the AI. I didn't mean to, and anything that's happened since is probably on me. But there we go. Let's see what happens. Sanasoa. She's down to 8 torpedoes, which is 2 launches from one side, or a broadside then a broadside. She chooses to do it. She's got 800 odd shells left, which is fine. That means roughly 100 salvos, possibly even slightly more than that. And she has lots of 3-inch shells left. She's doing well. She really is doing well. That's not so good, but she'll weather that. But the shells don't appear to be going, because I can see where the British cruisers are in green. And the shells don't appear to be firing at them. Admittedly, they're not always hitting themselves, but, you know. Some of them appear to be firing a bit too far in advance, overestimating Sanaswal's speed of advance. But she's down to 68%, 67%, 66%. Yeah. Ouch. This is not doing good. Now, I did show you these ships, and I don't think I can be accused of rigging them. They have 12 torpedoes. Well, considering they have 4 triple launchers, having 12 torpedoes suggests they just have the torpedoes sitting in launchers. And it's the same here. So they have no super advantage in torpedoes. No super advantage in 4-inch guns or 8-inch guns. Yeah, the Japanese paid for those extra 3 knots with a lot of armor and a single gun against this design. I'm not sure really, that was a good exchange. Or maybe it was a good exchange, but only if they could actually decide to avoid the fight, if they just do a full run away. Because the moment you decide to engage and get into 8-inch gun range, and stay in 8-inch gun range, you have the problem that, yes, I can run away ahead of you, but then all your guns can concentrate on me. And every time I fire a torpedo at you, you're dodging me. Now, this does simulate the fact that the British would probably have been weaving anyway, because, as said, the British presume submarines are everywhere. Legacy of Cressy, Abakar, and Howe. Yes, legacy of the Royal Navy losing free cruisers at the beginning of World War I meant that the Royal Navy are absolutely paranoid when it comes to submarines, and they almost always believe there are submarines lurking. They fundamentally do not believe there is a portion of the sea in the world which doesn't have a submarine lurking in it, ready to take advantage of them sailing in a straight line. This level of paranoia is not so good for your range, not so good for your speed of advance, but it is good for your survivability versus submarines. And it isn't necessarily 100% survivability against submarines, because there are still going to be times when you find yourself in a scenario where the submarine has the advantage, where the submarine, through fate, happens to be perfectly positioned that even though you're on one of your legs of zigzagging, you are going to, on that leg, run straight into front of it and straight through its path of torpedoes. And we can always be thankful for the Royal Navy. The Germans didn't have any T-class boats, neither did the Italians, because, let's be honest, if anything's designed to take advantage of a few seconds of you running just the right way in a snap scenario, it's the T-class with their massive salvo. Anyone would think the Royal Navy, when designing their submarines, thought, what would be our most nightmare scenario? This. We will design a submarine, therefore, to do that. And it works. Devastatingly a fair number of times, but it does work. I'd say I enjoy going through these questions and the comments. I'm not sure if you do, on while having the UAD videos on. I think it's a good match-up to the two, because it allows me to discuss things with it being quite an interesting background, instead of you just staring at my ugly mug while I read an answer. Oh, you've brought them back into range of this. That was not sensible. Bringing them back into range of Kingusa is not sensible. It's also not nice. You're basically using her. You're using her as a human shield. That's what you're doing. You're basically gone, I want to survive a little bit longer, so I've brought them back into range of her. And in return, they're going, yeah, we don't mind taking her out. Are you aiming for London again? Can we please just notice that HMS London is living a charmed life? She's at 100% of everything here and just going, have I even been in a battle? Does it even count if you haven't hit me? It's... I don't know. She could be going along singing, it's a hard knock. Oh, she's been hit. I spoke too soon. It's a hard knock life. It is. It's a hard knock life. It is. And the fire rages through her because she got hit in her engine areas. Oh, it's been put up. But actually, that's one of the other things I like about this simulation. It does give you an accurate idea of what happens when you're hit by fire, how it can move through compartments, and how it can move through things. She's hit a torpedo. A ship with a torpedo. Which one she hit with a torpedo? Oh, that's just cruel. That's cruel and unusual punishment. No wonder she's sinking. The poor thing was used as a human shield by you. Lifeboat's making away, but please don't let the lifeboat sink now. Go away, get away, lifeboats, get to safety. No cruel on them, and they keep going below water. That's not a good sign. Structural 19% float. Earlier you were floating at 100%. One torpedo hit. You've used all your torpedoes, though. And that's the trouble with using your colleague as a human shield. You are now alone and also damaged. You are. You are alone and you are going to be damaged. You are now, yeah. And London is still at 98%, 100% floating, and Black Prince is at 100% float and structurally 86%. Yeah, the more and more I do this with the stuff with this efficient ship design, I have to say I've been backed up by other colleagues doing it, the more and more I'm coming down to the perspective of the British were absolute idiots not to do more with it. And I know the argument was that these ships wouldn't look as elegant or as beautiful as the balanced design of the counties, but look at that! How is that not beautiful and how is that not elegant? I mean, that's just such a pretty little ship. It is. It's a very pretty little ship. Even beaten up and bashed, she's still lovely chugging along. And, well, this one looks like she's been sailing in a parade. She's got a couple of burn marks, but not really much going on there. Right then, Saxon, let's see, you are... Should have done that earlier. That's just not good. If you keep on like this, you're going to end up getting hit by a torpedo. I'm not sure if that actually even has any torpedoes left. No torpedoes left on Black Prince. Only high explosive main gun rounds as well. London. Also no torpedoes left. And mainly firing HE, I'd say. Like short on armor, short on armor piercing. I'm not sure, but neither has any torpedoes left. It's has run out of ammo. Has run out of, well, pretty much everything. That's not good. High explosive is probably the sensible thing to engage this ship with, let's be honest. It hasn't got enough armor to really trigger armor piercing. So if you use the high explosive, you're probably going to cause the maximum amount of damage. And don't take this the wrong way, anyone, but I don't think this particular vessel is long for this world. I'm not sure how far she's moving, but I doubt it's anywhere near 35 knots. And yeah, that's not good. Not good for her at all. She's got a lot of 3-inch gun rounds left, but that's not really going to help her in this fight. And why did I pick Japan? Why did I pick Japan as the model to test these on? Because in the 1920s, what was the likely enemy? Yes, the RN was doing a theoretical study of fighting a war against America because the US Navy and the Royal Navy were the two biggest navies in the world. So, in a nice way, if you're going to do the studies and you're going to put your people to the maximum test of testing how they would fight a war, then you have to pick each other. But the likely enemy was Japan. The likely threat was the Far East. And that's what the Royal Navy designed the ships around, and one of the reasons why so many ships, as soon as they're built, end up going on a tour of the Far East. To A, see how they perform in Far Eastern waters, and B, to see if they could, that ship's gone. It's just, look, in the nicest way, I'm not sure how you're claiming this ship is still in service, but it should be surrendering by now. This is primo boarding time if there was a tribal class destroyer around. Ouch, ouch, and that's just gonna hurt. And these ships would have been, if they were built, would have gone straight to the Far East. This is the likely threat. It's something I cannot state often enough. Pardon me. The most likely threat for the Royal Navy, the one it was pointing guns at, and was pointing guns at it for most of the 1920s and 1930s, was the Japanese. They were friends. They got along. They had good conversations. But there were incidents the whole way through. So, that is who you have to think about building ships against. And you also remember, the Japanese are also not a minor power. They are the only second-tier navy in the world. The French and Italians are third-tier navies. The Royal Navy and the US Navy are first-tier navies. There is only one second-tier navy in the world. And that is Japan. And that has the advantage of, if it fights a war against the British or the Americans, it can focus everything on fighting that war. The Americans, well, they can pretty much do that, as long as the British are in control of the Atlantic, because the British are unlikely to stab them in the back. But the British, if they're fighting a war versus the Japanese, have to make sure they maintain enough forces in Europe to deal with their European threats, which are Italy, which bisects the Mediterranean, which would be a key arterial supply route for any war in the Far East, and Germany, especially as the 1930s go on. This is the problem with the treaty system. And to an extent why the British are, as time goes on, the 5-3 ratio versus the Japanese starts to help the British. Because when you consider it's a 5-3 and a 1.75, theoretically balanced by the French 1.75, you then start to go, well, what percentage the Royal Navy is allowing to the Germans, and then it's a 1-to-1 with all our potential enemies, as long as our potential allies are on the side. Which sounds fine according to politicians, but I'm fairly sure most sensible naval officers, especially the more experienced ones, were absolutely screaming. And when I say screaming, I mean completely and utterly screaming. Now, earlier I had... Excuse me. It's done its weird thing again, but that's perfect. So, I had this up. I was recording this. Now, why am I talking about this? Well, this will go out on Friday the 3rd. This will go on Friday the 3rd. So, tomorrow, we're on HMCS Haida. Woohoo! If you're nearby, you want to come say hi to us, you're more than welcome to come say hi to us and, you know, come see us on Haida. We'll be more than welcome to say hi to everyone. We have dinner and with the Canadian fans, and we have on that day as well. That's being organised through the Discord, so please go and track down Stafford and Wayne to discuss it if you're interested in that. And yeah, we've got a good full few days up there. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and thank you very much. Take care. Thank you again for your support. This wouldn't be happening, especially not this, would not be happening without, but even this wouldn't be happening without your support. So thank you very much. Take care.